All right, so you're curious about INFPs, huh?
Mm-hmm.
They're those creative, idealistic types, right? Maybe even a little bit um, flaky. That's what people say anyway. But we're going to find out what the research actually tells us. We've got some awesome info from the University of Saskatchewan's Student Employment and Career Center for this deep dive.
Oh, wow.
They've got this awesome resource on the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And, well, we're zeroing in on INFPs today.
Nice.
Yeah, this is for anyone who wants to get a clearer picture of INFPs, whether you're one yourself, you work with them, or maybe you just love personality stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing what these personality frameworks can teach us.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So first things first, what really defines an INFP? I mean, beyond those usual labels,
Yeah.
creative and idealistic.
Well, INFPs are guided by something called introverted feeling.
Okay.
It's like having this really strong internal compass of values, like authenticity is so important to them.
So it's not just about being, artsy. It's like way deeper than that.
Exactly. They're driven by what feels right to them, not by, outside pressures or whatever people expect of them.
I see. And the source material actually highlights how INFPs are known for being flexible, thoughtful, and considerate.
Right. All of those traits come from that strong inner value system.
Yeah.
It leads them to want inner harmony and to make choices that fit with those, deep-seated beliefs.
Which makes total sense.
Yeah.
But everyone has challenges, right? What are some potential pitfalls for INFPs?
One thing that can trip them up is they tend to set super high standards for themselves, like almost to the point of perfectionism.
Oh, so striving for excellence, but maybe getting a little too caught up in it.
Exactly. And the source material mentioned that this can lead to INFPs struggling to see their own achievements.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's this inner critic that can be pretty harsh. It can even lead to difficulty with self-worth in some cases.
Really?
Yeah, they might get stuck in this all or nothing thinking. So if something isn't perfect, it's a total failure.
Whoa, that's intense. I bet a lot of our listeners, even if they're not INFPs, can relate to that feeling of never feeling good enough.
It's definitely a common human experience that struggle with self-acceptance.
For sure. Now, I'm curious about how INFPs approach learning. Are they like total bookworms? Do they love lectures? Give us the inside scoop.
Well, INFPs are naturally drawn to anything that explores possibilities and positive change. Think big ideas, abstract concepts. That's their thing.
Gotcha. So less about memorizing facts and more about finding meaning and connecting the dots.
Absolutely. And remember that introverted feeling. It drives their love for deep, meaningful learning experiences, especially those that connect to their values.
Makes sense. Which probably makes them awesome students in the right environment.
You got it. The source material talked about how INFPs often do really well in subjects like literature, philosophy, psychology, anything that lets them explore the human condition.
Interesting. I can picture them being those students that always ask the thought-provoking questions, the ones that make everyone stop and think.
Exactly. And when it comes to learning, they're often drawn to reading, connecting seemingly unrelated ideas, and finding inspiration from passionate instructors. They're not just passively absorbing information, they're actively making connections and seeking deeper meaning.
It's like they're creating their own internal library of knowledge, constantly adding new books and cross-referencing them with existing ones.
That's a great analogy. Now, something else that stood out to me from the source material was how INFPs approach writing. They've got this knack for it, especially when it comes to expressing their thoughts and feelings.
Okay, so they can like pour their heart out on paper, but maybe struggle with the more technical stuff.
Exactly. They're amazing at creative writing like poetry, but might find those structured academic essays a bit more challenging, especially introductions and conclusions. Getting started and wrapping things up neatly, sometimes that's where they get stuck.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see how that free-flowing creative energy might clash with those rigid academic formats.
Yeah, it's all about finding ways to channel that creativity within those structures.
Totally. And I bet a lot of our listeners, INFP or not, can relate to that feeling of writer's block or struggling to get those first few words down. It's a universal struggle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We all have our own, writing quirks and challenges.
Okay, so we've covered how INFPs learn and write, which is super insightful. But I'm also thinking about the real world. What kind of career paths naturally fit with INFPs' strengths and values? Because it can't be all poetry and philosophy, right?
Of course not. But here's the thing. INFPs are driven by a deep desire to make a positive impact on the world. Their work isn't just a job. It's an extension of their values.
Okay, so it needs to be something they're passionate about.
Yeah.
Something that aligns with that inner compass we talked about.
Exactly. Think about fields like counseling, social work, even healthcare. These are roles where INFPs can really channel their empathy and desire to help others.
Those helping professions do seem like a natural fit, given their compassionate nature. But the source material also mentioned some other interesting possibilities, right?
It did. They listed things like being a researcher, educator, therapist, or even an architect. It's a pretty diverse range. But what ties them together is that each path gives INFPs the opportunity to learn, create, and contribute in meaningful ways.
It's all about finding that intersection of their passions and their desire to make a difference. So let's say an INFP has found their dream job, one that really aligns with their values. What can they expect in terms of their work style and how they interact with colleagues?
Well, first and foremost, INFPs crave a harmonious and encouraging work environment. They're not going to thrive in a cutthroat competitive atmosphere.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Did you know that studies have shown that INFPs are 60% more likely to leave a job because of a toxic work culture compared to other personality types?
Wow, that's a powerful statistic.
hmm
It really highlights how important that sense of harmony and positive energy is to them.
Absolutely. And when they're in an environment that supports them, they bring so much to the table. They're adaptable, creative, dedicated to projects they believe in, and incredibly supportive of their colleagues' growth.
So they're like the dream coworker.
They really can be.
Yeah,
But of course, everyone has their, quirks.
true, true. And I'm guessing those high standards we talked about earlier might come into play in the workplace as well.
You bet INFPs can sometimes struggle with accepting finished products that don't meet their exceptionally high standards. It can lead to a lot of revisions and refinements, which can be a challenge in fast-paced environments.
I can see how that perfectionism could be both a blessing and curse. It pushes them to create amazing work, but also makes it harder to let go and move on to the next thing.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between striving for excellence and recognizing when it's time to call something done. Now, another challenge INFPs might face in the workplace. Comes from wanting to avoid conflict. They value harmony so much that they might sort of tiptoe around disagreements or even not say what they need to keep things peaceful.
Oh yeah, I can totally see that. They'd rather keep things smooth than rock the boat, even if it means not speaking up for themselves. But that can't be healthy, right? In the long run.
It's definitely something to watch out for. Bottling things up can lead to resentment or, let problems get worse. It's important for INFPs to learn how to say what they need in a way that's strong but respectful, and to find ways to handle conflict when it comes up. I mean, even in the best workplaces, disagreements happen.
That's true. So it's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's more about learning how to deal with it in a way that feels authentic to them.
Exactly. Now let's think about how this whole conflict thing plays out in teams. INFPs are great at seeing what other people need and they really want to work together. But what happens when those values clash with the way the team works or what they're trying to achieve?
That's a good question. Because on the one hand, they want everyone to get along and work together. But then you might have team members who just want to get things done quickly, or people who have different ways of solving problems. How do INFPs deal with that?
Well, the source material points out that INFPs can get frustrated when they feel like the team is giving up on something important, or when they see a disconnect between what the team is doing and their shared values.
It's like that inner compass we talked about starts going haywire. They can sense that something's wrong, even if they can't explain exactly what it is.
Right. And this can actually cause some internal conflict for INFPs. Do they speak up and risk upsetting the team's harmony? Or do they stay quiet and maybe betray their own values? It's a tough situation.
It sounds like teamwork for INFPs is all about balancing staying true to themselves with keeping those team relationships strong.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of self-awareness and communication. Now, with all this talk about harmony and avoiding conflict, you might be wondering, can INFPs actually be good leaders?
Honestly, that's exactly what I was thinking. It seems kind of counterintuitive, right? You picture a leader as someone who's decisive, maybe a little assertive, and INFPs don't really fit that mold.
It might be surprising, but INFPs can be amazing leaders,
Yeah.
and they have unique strengths.
Yeah.
Think about it. Their empathy helps them connect with their team on a deep level. They understand what motivates people and what they need.
So it's less about giving orders and more about inspiring and empowering others.
Exactly. They lead by example, motivating people with their passion and dedication to their vision. They often create a sense of shared purpose where everyone feels valued and part of the team's success.
So they create a really supportive environment, which is super important these days.
It is. But let's be real, leadership isn't always easy. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions or address conflict, and that can be tough for INFPs.
So how do they handle those trickier parts of being a leader?
Well, it often comes down to growth and self-awareness. They might need to push themselves outside their comfort zone and practice things that don't come as naturally, like being assertive and communicating directly.
Maybe finding a mentor who's good at those things, or taking a leadership course designed for INFPs.
Those are great ideas. It's all about recognizing their strengths, but also knowing where they can grow. And remember, conflict isn't always bad. Sometimes addressing issues directly can actually make the team healthier and more productive.
It's about choosing your battles and knowing when to stand up for what you believe in, even if it means making some people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of challenges, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, which is stress for INFPs. We talked about some triggers, but what are some practical strategies they can use to cope?
That's a great point. Managing stress is important for everyone, but especially for INFPs who tend to put others' needs first. They can get drained and burnt out if they don't take time for themselves.
So what are some self-care practices that can help INFPs recharge and deal with those stressful moments?
Well, remember how we talked about INFPs being drawn to nature and possibilities? Spending time outdoors can be really restorative for them.
So like going for a hike in the woods, listening to the birds, breathing in the fresh air. It's like hitting a reset button.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it helps them explore and connect with the world around them. Another great way for INFPs to de-stress is through creative expression.
Things like painting, writing, playing music,
Yeah.
anything that lets them express themselves.
Exactly. It's a way to process their emotions, explore their imagination, and find some peace and fulfillment.
It's like their creativity becomes a form of meditation.
In a way, yes. And of course, let's not forget about solitude. It's important for INFPs to have quiet time to reflect, recharge, and reconnect with themselves.
So their alone time is really important. It's where they process everything and think things through and come back to center.
Exactly. And it's essential for them to set boundaries and protect that time, even if it means saying no to social events or things that drain their energy.
So it's not about being antisocial or pushing people away. It's about taking care of themselves and realizing that self-care isn't selfish. It's essential.
Right. And one last thought on stress management for INFPs, they need to remember it's okay to ask for help.
Yes, they don't have to go through things alone.
INFPs are so focused on supporting others that they forget they need support too. Reaching out to friends, family, or a therapist can make a huge difference.
It's a reminder that we all need each other and that asking for help is a strength, not a weakness.
Well said. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about.
I'm all ears.
Think about this. How can understanding your own personality type, whether you're an INFP or not, help you in your relationships and interactions with others?
That's a great question. It encourages us to look inward and be more understanding.
Right.
It reminds us that we all see the world differently and that understanding those differences is key to building strong and meaningful connections.
Yeah, it really is amazing how understanding these different personality types can help us communicate better and build stronger relationships. It's like we're all speaking different languages, and the MBTI is this translator, helping us understand each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we can do that, it opens up so many possibilities for, collaborating and connecting.
It's like we unlock this whole new level of human interaction. Now, before we wrap up this awesome deep dive, I want to go back to something you said earlier about INFPs being drawn to careers with a social component, or ones that let them follow their ideals. It seems like that's a big thing for them. It really is. It goes back to those strong inner values we talked about. INFPs really want to make a positive impact on the world. Their work isn't just a job to them. It's part of who they are and what they believe in.
It's like a calling.
Exactly. And that can look like a lot of different things. Some INFPs love working directly with people, maybe as therapists or counselors or social workers, where they can use their empathy and compassion to help others through tough times.
It's like they're drawn to roles where they can actually make a difference in people's lives.
Right. But some might be drawn to more behind-the-scenes roles, like writing research or advocacy, where they can use their creativity and insights to, make a difference on a bigger scale.
So it's not about the specific job title. It's about the impact they're having and how their work reflects their values.
Exactly. For INFPs, finding that balance between what they love and what they believe in is super important for their happiness at work and just overall well-being. They need to feel like their work matters and that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves.
This has been so fascinating. I feel like I've learned so much about INFPs. Not just, their strengths and weaknesses, but also what motivates them and what they want to achieve.
Me too. It's been great exploring this with you.
And I hope our listeners feel the same way. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the INFP personality type, I want to leave everyone with this thought. No matter what your personality type is, Embracing self-awareness and trying to understand those around you can open up so many doors for personal and professional growth. It's about being empathetic, celebrating our differences, and remembering that we're all in this together.
That's a beautiful thought.
So until next time, keep those minds curious, those hearts open, and don't forget to embrace all the amazing personalities that make the world such a vibrant and fascinating place.